With everyone anxiously waiting for the release of Spider-Man Homecoming, it's time to go back, way back. I'm talking a whole 17 years to the bygone year of 2000. Written by Brian Michael Bendis and art by Mark Bagley, this is Ultimate Spider-Man.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider...
Well, the first, 13 issues at least. Get comfy because this is gonna be a long one. The comic opens up in a laboratory in Osborn Industries. Norman Osborn is checking out a new genetically altered spider that the company created when his lawyer alerts him of something over the phone. Norman hands the spider to his assistant who frantically tosses it back in the containment jar tube thing. The assistant didn't do a very good job because he didn't put the lid back on and the spider crawls out. Cut 2. A food court in a mall in Queens. A young Peter Parker is sitting around reading a book like a nerd. So, Flash Thompson and his best friend, Kenny Kong McFarlane, toss some, fries at him. Across from Peter at a different table is Mary Jane Watson, who's talking to one of her friends, Liz Allen. She and Peter lock eyes for a second, and then Peter gets hit with some more french fries. Peter's sitting all bummed out that he has food all over him, and then Uncle Ben shows up because he was there to buy some pants or something. Then Ben sees Mary Jane and he calls her over and they all start talking. The next day at school, Peter is again being bullied by Flash and Kong, and they're stopped by Harry Osborn. He walks over to Pete and he's telling him that he shouldn't worry since it's high school and it really doesn't matter. And then he's like, Peter, I bet in a few years you'll be the head of a giant corporation for technology and the internet. Doesn't that sound great? Oh. Later in the school day, Peter's in gym class. They're playing basketball and they're just free throwing and stuff. I don't know, sports. Peter's called up to throw and he misses. Everybody laughs. Coach yells at him. Later that night, at the Parker residence, the household is eating dinner. Peter is eating and reading a book, just completely zoned out, and Ben and May are talking about him. May thinks he has a social anxiety disorder, but Ben is like, he's just growing up, May. He's a teen. And then May's like, Peter, what did we say about reading at the table? And Peter's like, do we say we liked it? And then Uncle Ben smirks, and then Maze says she's gonna go search the web for social anxiety stuff, and then Ben's like, oh, that'll keep her busy for a while, and then they chuckle, and it's just a nice scene between family members. It's nice. I'm sure nothing bad's gonna happen. Even later that night, I guess, Peter and Harry are hanging out in the basement at Peter's house, and Peter's doing some stuff on a computer, while Harry's looking at some, science stuff that Peter inherited from his dead father. And then Peter sort of gets infatuated with this, mysterious formula that his dad was working on, but he never finished. So now Peter's been trying to complete it. Harry leaves, and when he arrives at his house, Norman is arguing about something on his phone, and Harry comes up and asks him about the school trip to the laboratory tomorrow. Norman just looks at him and yells, Martha! 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 And then he has his assistant kick Harry out of the office. What a dick. The next day at OI Laboratories, Peter's class is now on the field trip. They're walking through the halls on the tour. That scientist has a fucking cat in a giant jar. What are you gonna do to that cat? Anyway, Peter's walking and suddenly screams in agony. He recoils his hand to see a giant fucking spider on it, and he's really bleeding from a spider bite, holy shit. Naturally, he flings the giant spider off his hand. Unfortunately, it then lands on MJ. She swats it to the ground, and then Kong just stomps on it. Then Peter passes the fuck out. Later on the school bus, back from the labs, Peter's sitting and holding his hand where he got bit and talking to the teacher. The bus, by the way, is being driven by Otto Mann from The Simpsons. He's probably listening to his favorite band, Aerosmith. Anyway, the teacher tells Peter his aunt will pick him up and take him to the hospital when they get back. Norman Osborn is told about an accident that occurred on the field trip, and he's like, damn it, what the hell did Harry do now? That idiot! Oh, it wasn't Harry? Well, shit, now what's gonna happen? His two subordinates are like, well, they aren't gonna sue the school because the school doesn't have money, so they'll sue us. And the other one's like, yeah, and if you pay the bills, it's basically an admission of guilt. And then Norman's like, let's pay the bills and send them a nice fruit basket. I want to keep an eye on this kid. Later that night, Peter is sleeping while May and Ben are talking about what to do. May tells Ben that Osborn paid the bills and sent a fruit basket, and Ben's like, well, yeah, they don't want us to sue him. I mean, we're not gonna sue him, by the way. It was an accident. Also, Harry's like Peter's only friend, and suing his father would ruin the friendship. Don't worry, May. From here on out, everything will be back to normal. The next day at school, Peter is getting bullied for passing out after a fucking huge spider bit him, and MJ's friends tell her that she should stop hanging out with Peter. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about this. So Flash and Kong have this game they play for points. The game is to literally kick Peter's ass. So, for a 10-pointer, Kong runs in for the kick. But, gasp, Peter somehow realizes what's about to happen and grabs Kong's foot and flips him over. Then Peter passes out. Peter awakens at the hospital and then he gets a blood test. Then, a mysterious bald man steals the vial of blood. Norman analyzes Peter's blood and realizes that Peter's definitely gonna die from that spider bite. So he tells his bald friend to take care of him. The next day, Peter's out walking the street reading a book, and a black SUV, driven by that same bald man, rounds a corner and speeds towards it. Peter is somehow, yet again, alerted and does a fucking backflip over the car. Then Peter rushes over to make sure the guy's okay, but is then alerted that something else is wrong and runs away. And Norman decides that he must study Peter because he had no idea that the side effects would be anything other than dying. So Peter runs home and remembers the previous pages. Then he goes and starts doing some research. Later that evening, Ben and May are talking to Peter because Peter decided not to go to school today. Yeah. He played hooky. So they argue, and Ben tells him to go to his room, and Peter's like, my room? Yeah, I'm 15 years old. And then he fucking just runs up the stairs. And then Ben and May are like, poor kid, he had a tough week, but it's gonna pass. He's a teenager. Peter wakes up at 4 a.m. and climbs the walls in his room, and his reaction is, whoa, cool. The next day in class, Peter has like a spasm or something, and he destroys his desk. Peter goes to the bathroom and is trying to figure out what the hell is happening to him. In gym class, Peter is once again playing some round ball, and he's getting ready to make a free throw when he hears Flash getting all touchy with MJ. So, he throws the basketball and slams it right into Flash's face. And Flash is like, you, me, 3 o'clock, school parking lot. After school, Flash is swinging punches at Peter, with Peter moving out of the way just in time, just like the movie. Peter puts out his hand to stop Flash's incoming fist, and fucking breaks it. That night, Kong and Harry are hanging out at Harry's house, and Kong is telling Harry all about Peter breaking Flash's hand and how he fucking snapped the desk. Norman Osborn overhears. He calls Harry over and is like, hey, why don't you bring that Peter kid over to the lab? You like science, right? You guys can come over and hang out with me at the lab. And Harry, craving his father's affection desperately, agrees. At the Parker residence, Ben is on the phone and is told that Flash's parents are suing them. What pricks. And then Peter, Ben, and May get into an argument again. Peter runs upstairs, while May and Ben try and figure out how to pay for the lawsuit. Peter wakes up in a panic and decides to dress all in black and run to the nearest warehouse and do some gymnastics and lift cars. The next morning, he comes downstairs to apologize to Ben and May. Oh, and he isn't wearing his glasses. After school, Peter and Harry are walking around Osborn Labs. Then they meet Dr. Otto Octavius. Anyway, Ock walks behind Peter, pulls out a needle, and fucking draws blood from him. Peter, like any rational person, freaks out and rushes to the exit, and Harry follows him, but once he makes it outside, Peter has disappeared. Later, Norman, Octavius, and the assistant are looking over Peter's blood work, and they find out that Peter is incredibly healthy and like the perfect specimen. And Norman concludes that they must repeat the accident on himself. At the local mall, all the kids are hanging around this fucking wrestling ring that's in the center for some reason. The wrestling company has this whole competition where if you can take down the one, the only, the Crusher, You can win $500. Kong runs up and tries to enter the competition, but the announcer's like, sorry kid, you gotta be over 21. Now fuck off. That night, Peter puts together like a makeshift wrestling outfit, races to the mall, and jumps in the ring. He lifts Crusher Hogan above his head and slams him into the mat. And then Peter gets paid and places it in a letter and puts it under the door of his house, making it seem like all the teachers chipped in to donate money. At school, the gym coach comes up to Peter and asks him if he wants to join the basketball team. Peter accepts to spite Flash, who can't play anymore because of the whole broken hand situation. So, in Peter's first match ever in basketball, they win 114 to 26. Real subtle there, Peter. NJ asks Peter if he wants to come over and work on some project or something on Monday, but Peter declines. And he can't tell her why. It's wrestling. Peter and Crusher Hogan have this whole routine, probably an extensive K-Fab history. Well, they're pretty hot ticket superstars. So Peter defeats Hogan because that's their shtick, and the announcer asks for his name, which he didn't think of, so the announcer calls him the Amazing Spiderman. And then after the show, the announcer gives Peter a new costume. At Osborne Labs, Norman is getting ready to recreate the accident when Harry discovers them. Harry is promptly kicked out of the room, but then something goes horribly wrong. Harry awakens to find almost everyone dead, and the lab has been completely destroyed with no sign of Norman Osborn. Anyway, Peter is wrestling again, and after the show, he shows up to the manager to get paid, but the manager's like, "You stole all the money, didn't you? That's why you won't give me your name or any documentation." And all the wrestlers chase Peter out of the stadium. So while Peter's walking home all bummed out, he runs into a mugger. I think you know where this is going. Peter doesn't stop him and he gets away. When he gets home, Ben and May are real angry at him because he got a D in English, and he's a straight-A student. They argue and Peter runs out of the house. Peter goes to Kong's house and asks to crash over at his place. Kong is like, sure, I guess, because he has absentee parents or something. Anyway, Kong is wearing a Spiderman shirt and Peter's like, what the hell, I never got any royalties for this. Kong has like a party later in the night, and Peter's just sitting around on the couch. When Liz Allen comes over and asks him where Brainy Jane's at, Peter's like, come on, don't call her that. Liz asks if they're dating and starts coming on to him. Peter asks if she's drunk, and she's like, a little bit. Then, as they're about to kiss, MJ shows up and sees it happen. Peter runs after her, but runs into Uncle Ben, who drags him outside and, sort of scolds him about running away and not contacting them, and asks what's going on with him. Then Ben tells Peter about Peter's father's old philosophy of, if you can do great things, it's your responsibility to do those things. Then Peter gets upset and runs away again. Like all good drama moments, it starts to heavily rain as Peter is leaping around the city trying to clear his head and calm down. Later, after he clears his head and calms down, he returns home to see police and paramedics outside his house. So Harry wakes up in his room to his mom calling out his name. He runs out to the hall to see that his whole house is engulfed in flames, and then he looks up and sees a giant, horrific, shadowy monster. It launches a fireball into the house, and Harry escapes just in time to witness it flying off into the night. Back at Peter's house, May is telling the officers what happened. Basically, May and Ben were chilling in the living room when they heard the side door open. They assumed it was Peter, but got no response, so Ben went up to investigate. Then a man with a gun appeared and screamed for all their money. Ben chuckled and told the robber he probably has more money than they do. Then the robber got upset and shot Ben. Peter overhears on the police radio that they possibly have the same robber trapped in a warehouse. Peter races outside and changes into his Spider-Man outfit and makes his way to the warehouse. Peter gets there and he beats the shit out of the guy, and then he sees his face. It's the face of the mugger from the other night, the one he could have stopped. Peter then steals his ID and ties him up and lobs the guy out the window for the police. And then Peter finally understands what Uncle Ben told him about responsibility, and Spider-Man is born. Then Peter's walking home when he runs into MJ, who was waiting for him. Peter breaks down and starts crying, and MJ comforts him. At the Daily Bugle, J. Jonah Jameson is angry that their headline is about giant fire at the Osborn mansion and not on Spider-Man. Jonah tasks Ben Urich with finding out all he can about this Spider-Man, and that his Kingpin case can wait. At home, Peter is dancing around in his underwear because he finally figured out this formula his dad had left unfinished. What's the formula for, you may ask? It's the formula for his webs. At school, Peter falls asleep and then breaks another desk. Then he quits the basketball team before running into Harry. Peter and MJ rush to him, asking if he's okay. Then Peter's spider sense tingles and a huge explosion goes off. The place catches fire and everyone runs outside. Harry starts freaking out because he is coming for him. Then Spider-Man leaps over everyone's heads and races inside. Turns out a couple minutes ago, Peter ran into the bathroom to change into his costume, which he for some reason wears under his clothes, but realizes that if people see Spider-Man come out of the school, someone could put two and two together. So he leaps out the back and changes in some bushes, and then he runs around to the front. Spidey races inside to find a massive orc demon monster thing. He fights it through the halls, and then it grabs him and flies out of the school. Then it throws Spidey to the ground, but luckily he has his webs, which I don't like because they're like a weird mucus green. Whatever. He makes a net out of his webs and catches himself. So, Peter and the monster, which, for completely unrelated reasons, I'll call, I don't know, a goblin. Let's just go with a goblin. So, Peter and the goblin fight on the rooftops and make their way to the Brooklyn Bridge, I guess? I don't know. I've never been to New York. So they're fighting on top of the bridge, and then the nearby police helicopter opens fire on the giant beast, causing it to plummet into the cold waters below. Then Spidey escapes and makes his way back to the school. MJ runs up and gives him a big hug, and Peter's like, "Oh, what happened? I got stuck under some rubble or something." Then Harry tells everybody that the monster was his father coming to kill him. An unspecified amount of time later, the Shocker is robbing an armored truck but is quickly defeated by Spider-Man. At school, Peter overhears Kong and the others talking about Spider-Man, and he also learns that the Daily Bugle will pay anyone who gets them pictures of Spider-Man. So, in a back alley, Peter takes pictures of Spider-Man, wink wink, and heads to the Daily Bugle to sell them off. Peter shows up and shows JJ the pictures. Jonah does the whole,
"They're crap. 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 Mega crap."
but picks out one photo to use. Then Betty Brant gets pissed because she can't get the Daily Bugle website to work, so Peter comes over and looks at the code or something and fixes it. So Jameson hires him as the website guy. While working on the website, Peter looks up the mugger, because he still has his guy's ID, and it leads him to some articles about Wilson Fisk. He asks Robbie about Fisk, a.k.a. the Kingpin of Crime, and asks that if everybody knows he's a crime boss, then why does nobody do anything about it, or at least talk about it? Robbie tells him that the Daily Bugle used to have articles all about the Kingpin until Fisk bought a stock in the company. In a shady alley, the enforcers, Montana, Fancy Dan, and Ox, are hanging out and talking about this McDonald's that Fancy Dan wants to rob because they didn't give him a job in high school. Then they head back inside, but Spider-Man leaps down and fights them. He quickly defeats them, but runs into the leader of the enforcers, Mr. Big. Big deduces that Spidey actually wants the Kingpin, and since Big doesn't like Fisk and wants to overthrow him, he tells Spider-Man about a gala that Fisk is throwing at his tower on Friday. Then Scully and Mulder show up and arrest everyone, except for Spidey because he escapes. At school, Peter's eating lunch, and then MJ comes over and talks to him. She asks if he wants to go to see a movie with her. He obviously says yes. MJ suggests Friday, but Peter changes it to Saturday. Friday night, at the Fisk Tower, the fundraising gala is going on, and holy shit, Fisk is fucking massive! Like, Jesus Christ, he is so big! Anyway, Spider-Man breaks into the tower and he's sneaking around Fisk's office when suddenly he gets that funny feeling again. I wonder what that could be. Kingpin grabs Spidey and is like, "Who the hell are you? Who sent you?" And Spidey's like, Carson Daly sent me." Then Peter kicks him and breaks free, and Fisk calls for Elektra to handle this. Then Fisk calls for Electro to handle this. So Electro unleashes his electricity and fights Spider-Man, and then he gets him with a real good strike, and Peter is fucking dropped to the floor. One of the goons goes over and fucking unmasks Spider-Man, and everyone's like, the hell is just some kid? I don't recognize this guy. Then Kingpin takes his mask and has them throw Peter out the window. He demands for Mr. Big to make his way to the office and orders Electro to find this Carson Daly person and destroy them.
I will remember you. Will you remember me?
Peter luckily wakes up mid-fall and catches himself on the side of the building. The next day, Peter wakes up and calls MJ and tells her that he's not feeling good and cancels the plans. MJ starts tearing up and then hangs up. Back at Fisk Tower, Kingpin is talking to Mr. Big. Big complains about Fisk placing himself too far above the common thugs. Fisk orders Ox and Montana to hold down Big. Fisk places the Spider-Man mask over Big's head and fucking crushes his head with his massive hands in some weird catharsis for being upset about Spider-Man. The next morning, the police find Big's body washed up in the river. In history class, MJ and Peter are talking through some notes. Peter apologizes about Saturday, and the teacher is like talking about the Nixon tape. She asks why Nixon would record his every activity and move, and this reminds Peter about the security camera he saw when he was in Fisk's tower. And he like sort of remarks to himself, because he thinks he's untouchable. In the computer lab, Peter's researching the brand of security cameras when he remembers that English class has started. And I guess he was sent to see the school psychiatrist, Dr. Bradley. And she asks him about the giant monster that attacked the school and how it makes him feel. And then she starts asking him about his family. And Peter's like, yeah, I'm just gonna head out now. At home, Peter checks his email to see that the company has replied about the security camera. He researches the camera even more and finds an online video narrated by Patsy Walker, a.k.a. Hellcat. Anyway, it's just a presentation about how the videos are stored on discs and the security and stuff like that. At night, Peter breaks into Fisk Towers again and sneaks into the basement where the footage is being held. Fisk, maybe stop spending all your money on security cameras and get some actual security to make sure people aren't climbing in your tower. Peter is found, and one of the guards shoots at him, but hits the power box by mistake. Peter finally finds the discs that have the footage of Fisk's office the night he killed Big, but is immediately attacked by the enforcers and Electro. So Spider-Man fights them all and defeats them, and then he makes a beeline for the exit. But right before he walks out the door, Kingpin appears behind him. Spidey turns around and says, I promised myself that if I ever met you face to face again, I would tell you something. You are so fat that when you cut yourself shaving, marshmallow fluff comes out. You are so fat that your high school yearbook photo was taken from a helicopter. You're so fat that when you get on the scale, it says 1 at a time. In a fit of rage, Fisk screams and pops off all of his shirt buttons and charges Spidey, but misses all of his punches. Then Spidey webs his hands to the wall, then webs his face and escapes. The next day at the Bugle, Ben Urich finds a letter and a box of discs on his desk. He reads the note and then takes him to Jonah's office immediately. Peter then uses a company phone on company hours to make a personal call to MJ. Peter tells her to come over to his house after school tomorrow because he has something very important to tell her. Cut to the jungle. Fisk is reading a newspaper about the leaked footage of him killing Mr. Big, and he's talking to his lawyer who tells him that it's gonna be a while before he can return to New York. Back in New York, Peter and MJ are sitting around in Peter's room, and Peter tells her that he is Spider-Man. And then she literally falls off the bed with laughter. So Peter hops on the ceiling and climbs around, and MJ freaks out. But Peter tells her his origin story, and she's like, oh my god, this is awesome, you're a superhero, oh my god, everybody loves you. MJ, in complete joy and excitement, starts jumping on the bed. Peter tells her to stop since Aunt May is in the house, and bed squeaking probably sounds pretty bad out of context. Then Peter tells her that no one else can ever know about this, and that she is the only person who knows that he is Spider-Man. And then she's like, wow, I can't believe this. I thought you were just gonna kiss me. And then Peter's like, well, I mean, if you want to kiss, why not? As they slowly move closer and closer to each other, Aunt May knocks on the door and tells MJ that her mom is on the phone. Apparently, MJ has to be home immediately to clean out the litter box. So she says her goodbyes and leaves. May makes Peter uncomfortable by hinting at sex and asks if he even knows about it. May tells him that there is no hanky-panky in the house. Then she tells him that Mary Jane is a special girl and that she likes her. And Peter remarks that she is a special girl and that he likes her too. And then May tells him that his parents met in high school. She closes the door and Peter falls back onto his bed with a big smile on his face. The end.